Hey, this is Professor Homo. Welcome to CSC 235, and this may or may not be ex10. The ex9 was the one where we started working with arrays, and we're going to be working with arrays, except we're going to be working with images. And before we do that, this is like a little pre-exercise before we even do that, because I want you to get familiar with all the little quotes and stuff that we're going to have to work with the innerHTML property when we start putting elements on a page, because they get a little confusing, and I thought it might be nice to kind of go over this before we get into the images, just so it makes some sense. That way you could kind of play around with it a little bit. And I'm going to use W3 Schools for that because they have some code to start with. And I'll give you a link, but just to get started here, I'm going to go to the JavaScript tutorial, and where you would go is you'd go all the way down to the bottom. It's not the easiest place to find, but you'd go all the way down to JS references and go to HTML DOM objects. DOM means document object model, and we're going to go there. And when you go to this page, you'll see JavaScript and HTML DOM reference, and if you go down just a little bit, you'll see DOM reference, and we're just going to go to DOM elements. So we're going to DOM elements. It's not in here. These are HTML elements. These are DOM elements. They help us navigate through the document object model. And we'll go here, and when you scroll down a little bit, you're going to see a whole list of things, and you're going to go, oh God, look at all these things. But you're going to look for innerHTML, and we already have worked with innerHTML. That's how we've put things on a page in HTML pages through JavaScript. So I'm going to click on this. Now this will bring up another page, but it's the HTML DOM innerHTML property. And if you scroll down, there's a bunch to scroll down, and I'm not even sure how many, but you're looking for the one that says delete. There's one that says get. Here's one that says change. Here's one that says alert. Here's one that says delete. This is what we want. We're going to work with this, and I'll provide a link if you can't find it. But we're going to go into the little try it yourself button here. And this thing is just a real simple example. What they're doing here is you're just hitting this try it button, and it's replacing this line that's here. When you hit the try it button, it's replacing it with nothing. And I'll run it again, and the way it does that, it's just a real simple bit of code here. It has a PID equals demo, and this is the text that's inside there. That's actually the innerHTML. That's the content that's inside that HTML tag. It's a P tag, a paragraph tag, and it has an ID of demo. And what's happening, we've done this before. There's a function running, and it says get element by ID demo, and it's saying change the innerHTML to nothing. Nothing means this is just an empty string. Two quotes is just an empty string. So it's basically replacing this with this, which is nothing. So when you hit try it, it replaces it with this, and there's nothing in there. So going by that idea, what I want you to be aware of is when we put stuff in here, even if I put the word hello in here, I could put the word hello in there, and I'll run this again, and I'll hit try it, and it'll put the word hello. Now it just puts it in as a paragraph, so it's a P tag, and it's essentially the same as doing that. That's kind of what it does. Now I'll undo that. So that's all that's doing, is just putting text in that innerHTML. Now keep in mind that you can also put HTML tags in here. Now when you do that, you'd have to keep the quotes that are there. So let's say you wanted to put an H1 that says hello. You'd have to do this. You'd have to put an H1 and close the quote, and then after hello you'd have to put the H1 with the closing tag. So you'd have open and closing H1 tags and hello, and then the whole thing would be surrounding quotes. So what it would be doing is it would actually be putting this inside the P tag. So it would actually be putting an H1 inside a paragraph, which normally we wouldn't do, but I'm just showing you that you can do that. So if we did do this, if I hit run and I did it, it puts hello. So it puts an H1 tag inside of that. And if we looked at the DOM, and we'll use the inspect to actually look at the DOM, but if we did look at it, you'd actually see that we put an H1 inside a paragraph, which we wouldn't do, but you can do it. Now another thing, let's just say, for example, and I'll stretch this out a little bit, let's say you wanted to turn that red, and you wanted to make an H1, you wanted to make it red. Now there's lots of ways you could do it. We could do it with CSS, but let's say you wanted to put a internal CSS style inside of this tag. Now the reason I'm showing that is because then it's quotes inside of quotes, which gets a little confusing, and that's the whole point that I'm showing you this. So remember, if you'd want to do an internal CSS style, you'd have to put it right inside the H1 tag, and you'd do H1, and you would do style equals, and then you wouldn't use the same quote again. Because these are double quotes, we would use a single quote, and we're going to do style equals, And what I'll put in here is I'll just put color, because that's the style of text color. I'll put color, and I'll put a colon, and then I'll just put red, and then I'll put a semicolon, and then I'll finish off with that single quote. So let me just stretch it out just to show you what it looks like. So it's doing this h1 style equals, and we're swapping, we're not using the double quotes, now we're using single quotes, because JavaScript doesn't like when we use the same quotes. It doesn't know where they're starting and where they're ending. So we're doing a double quotes around everything, and then inside the tag we're using single quotes. You know, and you could do this. Even if this makes it simpler, let me put a single quote on the outside. We can do this. I'll put a single quote because we're used to seeing it like this anyway, and I'll put a double quote on the inside as long as we're consistent. We could do this because this is the way we see styles, some internal styles sometimes. So I'll put a single quote on the outside and I'll use double quotes on the inside, and that should do the same thing. So I'm just going to run this and I'll try it, and it should make that red, and that's what it did. And I'm just pointing out that we have to be aware of what's happening with the quotes here, because they can get confusing, especially when you start putting different attributes and values inside of here. You put CSS in here, if you put images inside here, and that's what I actually want to do. Let's say we want to put an image inside here. Instead of in this area, we want to click this and we want to put an image there. Now, since we're working in W3 schools, we don't have the ability to put a local image, so we could just get something off the internet and put the full URL. The full address. I'll just Googled SpongeBob SquarePants and put something in there. So that's what I'm going to do. Now, before we even put that in there, let me do this. I'll keep the single quote there, I guess, for now. And I'm going to actually leave the tag, because an image tag, an image source, if we put an image source, an HTML tag, it doesn't have opening and closing tags. It just has, it goes inside of a single tag. It's a single element. It would be something like this: image source, and then it would be equals, and then there would be, I'll just put some spaces here. And there would just be some image address inside here. If it was local, it would just be like, you know, something.jpg or images / something.jpg. Now, because we're going to get it from the internet, or, you know, we're going to keep it online, it's going to be a long address in there. So let's just go find something. So I just went here and I found SpongeBob SquarePants. Now, keep in mind, if you grab one of these, find something small. Like look first, hover over it, look at that. You can't use that. That has 666 on it. That's scary. Don't use that. This one's 2,000 pixels. You don't want anything really big. That's 452. That's okay. Here, and I use this one because it was smaller. Actually, let me try this one, because this one's 452 by 302. And let me see the others are a little bigger. So we only want something that's maybe 100, 200 pixels. But I'll try this one. This has the whole gang here, but it's probably too big for what we need. But I'll click on it, and this is how big it is right now. This is the full size. And to get the image address, you can just right-click on it and do copy image address. And I'll just copy the image address, and then I'll go back here, and I'll put the image address inside here, and I'll get rid of all the spaces, and I'll just paste it in. You can see it's a long address, so this gets kind of confusing, but that should work. And I'll hit run. Now, not restarting this or anything, I'm just hitting run, and what should happen is it should show that picture there. Now, it's pretty big, and we could shorten this. It's not that big. We could shorten this, and that's what it's doing. It's showing that image. And again, what I just wanted to point out is we have these double quotes. We have the single quotes on the outside and the double quotes on the inside. And just to make things a little more confusing, let's say we wanted to make this thing a little bit smaller. It's, I forget what size image this is. It's, 452. Let's say we wanted something, it's kind of like a 4.5 by 3. Let's say we wanted like 3 by, I don't know, we could distort it a little. But let's say we want to make it a little smaller. Maybe we'll make the width 250 and the height 100 or something. We'll just make a little smaller image just to try it out. Now, if we wanted to do that, we'd have to put those are HTML attributes we'd have to put inside here. They would be out. They'd still be in the tag, in the bracket, but they'd be outside of the quote. So you'd do something like this. You would do something like with, now this is HTML. Maybe you're not familiar with HTML, but you do with, and you do something like, I'll put 250. And you don't use units in HTML tags. You just say 250. It's assumed that it's pixels. So I'm going to do width equals 250, and then I'll do a space, and I'll do height, and I'll do equals, and I'll do like 120 for now. And I'll see how that works out, and I'll use the double quotes right now. And you can see that's inside that tag that I have there, and I'm using double quotes. So I'm using opening and closing double quotes inside the big single quotes that are on the outside. Okay, and I'll just run it, and I'll see if this works. Just trying it out, and I'll hit try it, and that works. And you can see it's distorted, so it's too wide. So I could go back and maybe make the height probably a little more, maybe something like 150. See if that looks a little normal. I'll hit. That looks a little better now. I don't know if that's perfectly in proportion, but that looks good. So I just want you to be familiar with doing that. Now, one more thing I'll do here with all this. You might say, wow, that's really confusing, putting this whole URL in there. Couldn't I just like make like a variable that represents that? Well, let's try that. That's the next step I want to do. Let's try that because we're going to be doing things like that. So we don't have to do it inside our function, but let's say we made a variable and we did something. We just said var, and we just said, you know, I'll just do SB, and we'll put equals. We'll have it represent our image, and let's just take our whole address image here. I'll take the whole quote that we had here, and I'll just cut it, and I'll put it here. Now I'm not going to I'm going to take the size stuff out for now. I'm just going to put the image. I don't want to make it too confusing, so I'll just put the image. And again, the idea is here is we're trying to just say, okay, the var equals that. Okay, so then that way we don't have to put this whole address in here, because this makes the JavaScript really confusing. So we're just having SB for SpongeBob equal, this is the URL, so that's the URL that we have there. That's the image. Now let's say we want to just use the variable in here. How would we do that? Well, the reason I'm doing this is we're going to have to do it when we do the image array. So that's why we're doing it. If you wonder why we're messing with all this. So we're going back here, and we're just going to start again. And we'll just start again with image src, and we'll do equals. And then you might say, well, can we just put SB in there? Well, let's try it. We'll just, in quotes, we'll just put SB. And I'll do double quotes, because remember, we have single quotes on the outside. And actually, one thing I don't have here is I have to make sure I keep my closing bracket here. So there's a single quote outside of the brackets, and then the double quote is the SB. Now SB, that would really be a string. It doesn't look like a variable, because remember, variables should probably show up in black. That doesn't look like a variable, but we'll try it. We'll hit run, and we'll try it, and we're getting a missing. So it's not showing up. It's having a problem there. It doesn't like it. It is trying to look for an image because it sees the image source, but that's not the image. So it's not linking up to this. So what we're going to have to do is make sure it shows up as a variable in here, and what we're going to do is we're actually going to do a we'll do two quotes and then a plus, and then we'll do a plus and then a double quote. And what this should do, this should actually kind of wrap this around, and I'll put a space here with the variable, and what this should do is hopefully wrap around this. Now again, we're just trying this, so we'll see what happens here. So I'll run again, and I'll hit the try it button. Okay, now that didn't work either. Now it's not seeing anything. And again, that didn't work because notice we didn't alternate our quotes. Now we have three sets of quotes, and we went single, then we went double, and we went double, and then so what we need to do is we need to alternate, because remember, everything is going to be inside the double quotes, and what I need to do in here is just put a single quote in here and put a single quote over here. So it's kind of wrapping our variable. It doesn't like just having a variable inside here. In order to recognize it as a variable, we have to kind of put another quote in here to kind of make it think it's a string with a variable. That's why we have these little plus signs here. Because remember, it didn't work just like this, or at least I don't think it did. Oh, wait a minute. I think that'll work. We just needed an extra quote around here. So we needed to put a separate little quote around the SB, because notice how it's showing up in black. So we're going single, and then we're going double, and then we're putting single again. See, if we didn't have those single quotes in there, it doesn't recognize it as a variable. It thinks it's just like a string or something. So if we put a single in there and we wrap that, and again, we could put plus signs around there, but that should work because it's showing up as black. So that should be linking it to that variable. And let's try it out. And we'll try it. Let's run it again, and we'll try it. And it's not working. Now it's good it's showing up in black. Let's try this. Let's try putting the plus, because we may need the plus in there. So we're going to put a plus there and a space, and we're going to put a space and a plus, and we'll see how this works. And we're going to run it. I think that looks okay, and we'll hit try it, And now we have our image. So we do need the pluses in there. And again, I did this earlier, but I just wanted to make sure. So we do need the pluses in here. That way it knows that it's a variable mixed with a string, because these quotes, these single quotes right here, this one and this one, indicate that it's kind of the string that's inside there, that there's a string inside where the normal address would be. So this thing would be the address, but then we're also putting a string in here, and then with the plus sign we're indicating that we have a variable. So it gets a little confusing, and sometimes it's a little trial and error, but I just wanted to practice with this just to get the feel of it. Now if we wanted to change the size of this, I wouldn't want to do it in here. I'd want to do CSS and actually just target the image element and just make it 75%. I mean, we could very easily go in here, and now we don't have head tags or anything, so I'm not even going to bother. But if we put head tags in here, we could target the image tag and put 50% and 75% and make that smaller. But again, now that we hit run again, we hit TryIt, and we're replacing it with this image. Now again, we're putting an image tag in here, an image source tag, and that has to be in quotes, and then the address is in quotes. And then we're putting a string in quotes that has a variable in it, but there's really nothing part of the string. There's no part of the string. We're just kind of adding nothing to a variable just so it accepts the variable that's in there. So that way we can kind of make a variable to represent this real long address and just have SB in there. Now again, I just want you to get familiar with this. So try to do that. You can use any kind of image if you want, but try to do this. Try to set this up so that you start with this and you're just putting an image in here. You could try anything, but that's why I like using this and CodePen and all this. We could kind of mess around a little bit before we start our next file. Now the next exercise that we do, we're going to be going back in brackets because we have to manage some images in a folder and all that. So we're going to be doing an image array and doing some random images. But I just wanted to get you started with this because when we do something in there, we are going to have this little issue with the quotes, and it may be a little confusing. Not that I don't know if this completely explains it for you, but just remember that we do have to alternate quotes. You may have to do a little trial and error, but when you do put a variable inside as an image source, you just remember that you have to kind of treat it like there's a string inside there as well. So hopefully that helped a little bit, and hopefully that'll make some sense as we move on. But again, we'll run it, tried it. We basically just replaced, with innerHTML, just replaced an image where there was just text. And that's inside a p tag. So we have an image inside a p tag. So that's ex10, the beginning, just kind of a little start. That's ex10, the beginning, just a little start, and then we're going to be moving on and kind of doing we're going to use an array and generate some random images with some rock, paper, scissors. So we'll be doing that next. But try this out. When you're done with this one, you can just hit the save button. You could save it, and you could just send me this URL just so I know that you did that. Just email me this URL. You could click on it. You can right click and you could say copy, and you could put that in your email and say in your email and just send it to me so they see that you did that. Again, I just want you to experiment in here a little bit, and I'll have instructions for that, and then we're going to move on to the image array.